Have you ever found that perfect spot? You make a cast, and bam, fish on, another cast, another fish. For 10, maybe 15 minutes, it's non-stop action. And then, nothing. It's like someone flipped a switch. The spot just dies. The old wisdom, the stuff you hear from guys at the boat ramp, says you've been there too long, you've created an oxygen dead zone by stirring things up, and the fish have fled for their lives. But what if I told you that's one of the biggest myths in fishing? Today, we're going to tear that idea apart. We're going to expose the truth about why your honey hole goes cold after 20 minutes. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand the real reason, and it will change the way you approach a spot forever. So, let me ask you this, and be honest in the comments right now. Do you believe you can literally suffocate fish out of a spot? Let the debate begin. This idea of an oxygen dead zone isn't new. It's been passed down for generations. It kind of makes sense on the surface, right? You're there, making a commotion, you're pulling fish out, they're fighting, thrashing around. The whole school of fish gets worked up. The logic is that all this activity, all these fish breathing heavily in one small area, must use up the available oxygen in the water. Once the oxygen level drops below a certain point, the fish have no choice but to leave and find water they can actually breathe in. It's a simple, easy-to-understand explanation for a very common problem. This belief has led thousands of anglers to follow the 20-minute rule. If you don't get a bite in 20 minutes, or if the bites stop, it's time to move on because the spot is ruined for a while. But we're here to ask the question, are we just following tradition, or is there any real science to back this up? First, let's talk about what this theory actually claims. The core idea is that a localized area of water, like a small cove or a deep hole, has a finite amount of dissolved oxygen. When a school of fish is present and an angler starts catching them, the increased activity and stress cause the fish to consume oxygen at a much higher rate. The theory suggests that this consumption can outpace the water's ability to replenish its oxygen supply. After about 20 minutes of this intense activity, the oxygen level supposedly plummets, creating an environment that is no longer hospitable for the fish. They are forced to evacuate the area to avoid suffocation. Picture it like a small, crowded room where all the windows are shut. Eventually, it gets stuffy and hard to breathe. This is the mental image many anglers have. It's a compelling story because it feels intuitive, and it neatly explains a frustrating experience we've all had on the water. But as we're about to see, the physics and biology of a lake or river are a lot more complex than a stuffy room. So why does this theory sound so believable to so many of us? It plays on a fundamental truth. Fish absolutely need oxygen to survive. We all know this. We see them breathing by passing water over their gills. When we take a fish out of the water, it can't breathe. So the connection between fish, water, and oxygen is deeply ingrained in our understanding of the sport. The theory simply takes this known fact and applies it to a specific fishing scenario. It adds a sense of urgency and a tangible, scientific-sounding reason for our lack of success. It's easier to blame a dead zone than to admit we might be doing something wrong or that the fish are just not biting. It gives us a clear action to take. Move. This simplicity is powerful. It feels like a piece of secret knowledge, a pro tip that separates the seasoned angler from the rookie. It's a classic example of correlation being mistaken for causation. The fish stop biting after 20 minutes, and we assume the cause is this invisible factor of oxygen depletion. Now let's bring some reality into the picture by talking about water movement. Even the calmest-looking pond is not a static, sealed container. Water is constantly in motion, even if you can't see it. There are subtle currents created by temperature differences known as convection. The warmer surface water and the cooler, deeper water are always slowly circulating. Wind blowing across the surface, even a gentle breeze, is a massive engine for mixing water and, crucially, for introducing oxygen. Think about it. On a windy day, you see ripples and waves. Every single one of those ripples is increasing the surface area of the water that's in contact with the air, allowing more oxygen to dissolve into it. Even in a seemingly protected cove, there is still a significant amount of water exchange with the main body of the lake. It is extremely difficult to isolate a pocket of water long enough for a few fish to use up all its oxygen. The natural systems for replenishing oxygen are far more powerful and efficient than we give them credit for. Let's get into the science of dissolved oxygen, or DO as the biologists call it. Where does it even come from? There are two primary sources. The first, and most important, is the atmosphere. Oxygen from the air dissolves directly into the water at its surface. This process is massively accelerated by any kind of surface agitation, wind, waves, or even the flow of a river over rocks. This is why waterfalls and rapids are so oxygen-rich. The second source is photosynthesis. Aquatic plants and algae, just like plants on land, take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen as a byproduct during the day. This process can supersaturate the water with oxygen in weedy areas on a sunny afternoon. So you have these two powerful, constant sources pumping oxygen into the aquatic environment. A lake isn't holding its breath. It is constantly breathing in and out, thanks to the wind and the sun. The idea that a handful of bass or walleye could undo this massive, ongoing process in a mere 20 minutes is where the theory begins to fall apart. Here's a simple visual to help you understand. Think about a home aquarium. If you have a lot of fish in a small tank with no filter or bubbler, you can run into oxygen problems. But what does a bubbler do? It doesn't actually inject that much oxygen with its bubbles. Its main job is to move water from the bottom of the tank to the top. This movement creates constant agitation at the surface, which is where the real gas exchange happens. The surface of your favorite fishing lake is like the surface of that aquarium, but on a colossal scale. It's a gigantic living membrane that is constantly absorbing oxygen from the atmosphere. A 20-acre lake has over 870,000 square feet of surface area, all of it breathing. Now imagine your fishing spot. Maybe it's a 20 by 20 foot area. You're talking about a tiny fraction of the lake's total lung capacity. The water in that spot is not isolated. It's constantly being refreshed by the vast ecosystem it's connected to. The bubbler is always on. Let's also consider how much oxygen a fish actually uses. While a stressed fish fighting on a line does consume more oxygen than a resting fish, its metabolic rate isn't astronomical. Fish are cold-blooded creatures, and their bodies are incredibly efficient. Their oxygen requirements are far, far lower than those of a warm-blooded mammal of a similar size. They are adapted to extract tiny amounts of dissolved oxygen from the water with remarkable efficiency. For a school of, say, 10 largemouth bass to significantly impact the oxygen levels in a fishing hole that contains thousands, if not tens of thousands, of gallons of water, they would need to be breathing at an impossible rate for a prolonged period. The volume of water in even a small fishing area is simply too vast, and the natural replenishment of oxygen is too constant for a few fish to make a dent in the overall DO level in just 20 minutes. It's a matter of scale. The fish's consumption is a drop in the ocean compared to the water's capacity. Let's put some rough numbers to this to really drive it home. Imagine a pretty typical fishing hole. Let's say it's 20 feet by 20 feet and an average of 10 feet deep. That's 4,000 cubic feet of water. 1 cubic foot of water is about 7.5 gallons. So our modest little spot contains roughly 30,000 gallons of water. 30,000. Now think about the fish. A healthy population might have 10 or 20 bass living in that area. Can 20 fish, even if they're panicking, use up the oxygen in 30,000 gallons of water that's constantly being refreshed by the rest of the lake? It's like saying 10 people in a football stadium could use up all the air in 20 minutes. The math just doesn't work. The volume of the medium is too great, and the biological demand is, in comparison, minuscule. The dead zone theory dramatically overestimates the fish's impact and profoundly underestimates the resilience of the aquatic environment. So let's just say it directly and put this myth to bed. Is the oxygen depletion theory true? No, absolutely not. The notion that you and the fish you're catching can create an oxygen-starved dead zone in 20 minutes is, for all practical purposes, a fishing fairy tale. It's based on a misunderstanding of aquatic biology and physics. The water volume is too large, the natural oxygen replenishment systems are too powerful, and the fish's oxygen consumption is too low to make this scenario even remotely possible in a typical fishing situation. While extremely rare and specific conditions like a thick, ice-covered pond with deep snow blocking sunlight combined with decaying vegetation could lead to low oxygen over a whole winter, it's not something that happens in 20 minutes on a Tuesday in July because you were catching fish. The reason the bite dies is not because the fish are fleeing suffocation. They are leaving for other reasons, reasons that are far more important for you to understand as an angler. If it's not a lack of oxygen, then what is the real reason the fish stop biting? The answer is much simpler and has to do with psychology, not chemistry. The number one culprit is something we all talk about, fishing pressure. But it's more than just a vague term. It's a series of specific events that you are causing. Every cast you make, every time your lure splashes down, every retrieve, and especially every time you hook, fight, and land a fish, you are sending powerful signals throughout that small area. You are announcing your presence in a big, disruptive way. Fish are not mindless eating machines. They are wild animals whose survival depends on their ability to detect and avoid threats. And a thrashing, panicked fish that was just swimming with the school a moment ago sends a very clear signal to every other fish in the area. Danger! Something is wrong here. This is not a safe place to be. Let's dig deeper into this idea of pressure by talking about what happens when you hook a fish. It's not a silent event. The hooked fish pulls, thrashes, and often sends out vibrations and distress signals that other fish can easily detect with their lateral lines. More importantly, many species of fish, particularly baitfish, but also some game fish, are known to release alarm pheromones or Schreckstoff from their skin when injured. This is a chemical signal that screams predator attack to other fish of the same species. When you catch that first aggressive bass from a school, it might be releasing chemical warnings to all its buddies as you fight it. The other fish might not understand exactly what's happening, but they receive a clear chemical message that one of their own is in big trouble. Their survival instincts kick in. Their immediate priority is no longer feeding. It is now avoiding whatever caused that distress. They become wary, they move away, or they get lockjaw. The party is over. Here is a perfect, real-world example of fishing pressure. Imagine you're at a picnic, enjoying a sandwich. Suddenly, a hawk swoops down and grabs the person sitting next to you. After the initial shock, are you going to sit there and calmly finish your lunch? Of course not. You're going to be on high alert. You'll probably pack up and leave. That's exactly what's happening underwater. The first few aggressive fish are like the hungry, unsuspecting picnickers. They see your lure, a juicy-looking meal, and they attack it without a second thought. But once you catch one, the whole dynamic of the area changes. You have revealed yourself as a predator. The remaining fish, the ones that were maybe a little more cautious to begin with, have now witnessed or sensed a violent abduction. They're not going to make the same mistake. They hunker down, become defensive, and will ignore even the most perfectly presented lure. You haven't removed their oxygen, you've removed their sense of security. The second major reason the bite dies is related to pressure, but it's more specific. Let's call it sensory overload. Your presentation, the combination of your line, your lure, and your retrieve, is not nearly as subtle as you think it is. Fish have incredibly keen senses. They can see the shadow of your fishing line, especially in clear water. They can feel the faintest vibrations through their lateral line. The splash of your lure landing in the same spot over and over is the equivalent of someone clapping their hands right next to your ear. At first, the flash and wobble of your crankbait might trigger a predatory response. It's new and exciting, but after the 10th, 20th, or 30th time, it has swum past their face. It's no longer a potential meal. It's a repetitive, unnatural annoyance. They become conditioned to it. They learn to associate that specific flash, that specific sound, and that specific vibration with danger, or, at the very least, with something that isn't food. You've effectively trained them to ignore your lure. Let's break down the impact of your lure from the fish's point of view. That spinnerbait blade doesn't just flash, it sends out a powerful, rhythmic pulse through the water. That chatterbait thumps with a vibration they can feel in their bones. That topwater popper creates a loud disturbance on the surface that announces its presence from yards away. Initially, these signals mimic prey and attract attention. A bass thinks, is that a struggling bluegill? I should go check it out. But when that same exact signal happens repeatedly without resulting in a credible meal, and especially after it results in a buddy getting yanked out of the water, the meaning of the signal changes. It transforms from a dinner bell into an alarm bell. The fish become desensitized or, worse, repulsed by it. They learn the pattern. The element of surprise is gone. You're no longer ambushing them, you're just pestering them, and they respond by shutting down completely. Let's paint a picture. Imagine you're a big old large-mouth bass, sitting comfortably under the shade of a sunken log. It's your spot. You're just waiting for something tasty to swim by. Suddenly, a bright-colored plastic thing with hooks on it zips past your face. Interesting. You watch it. A minute later, the same exact thing zips by again. Okay, then again, and again, and again. For 20 solid minutes, this unnatural, repetitive object keeps invading your personal space. You saw your cousin Earl chase it 10 minutes ago and he disappeared in a violent splash. Now, are you going to be tempted to eat that thing, or are you going to press yourself tighter against that log and wait for the annoying pest to go away? You're going to wait. The fish aren't gone. They haven't suffocated. They're still there, but they have learned from immediate, repeated experience that your lure is not something they should eat. You have educated them. There's a third, equally important factor at play here. When you first arrive at a spot, you almost always catch the most aggressive, least intelligent fish first. Think of them as the low-hanging fruit. In any population of fish, there's a natural variation in personality. Some are bold, reckless, and competitive. These are the fish that will race to hit a lure the second it splashes down. They are opportunistic feeders, and their aggression makes them easy to catch. So, in those first 10 or 15 minutes of incredible action, you are effectively weeding out all the easy targets. You're catching the bullies, the daredevils, and the plain dumb ones. Once they're gone, either in your live well or spooked after being released, who is left? The smart ones, the cautious ones, the fish that prefer to hang back and observe before committing. This concept of fish having individual personalities is backed by scientific research. Biologists have shown that within the same species, some fish are consistently bold, while others are consistently shy. The bold individuals are more willing to take risks, explore new things, and, you guessed it, strike at artificial lures. The shy individuals are more cautious, risk-averse, and much harder to fool. Your initial flurry of action is you catching all the bold fish in that spot. After that, you're left with an audience of shy, skeptical fish who have just watched their reckless brethren get into a world of trouble. These remaining fish require a much more subtle and patient approach. They're not going to fall for the same loud, fast-moving lure that worked 10 minutes ago. The bite hasn't died. The type of fish willing to bite has changed. You've simply filtered out the easy catches, and now the real challenge begins. Here's a great human parallel for this. Imagine walking into a party. The first people you'll probably talk to are the extroverts, the loud, outgoing people who are eager to engage. You can have several quick, easy conversations right away. But after you've chatted with all of them, the room might seem to go quiet. But is it empty? No. The introverts, the quiet observers, are still there, standing by the wall, watching. To talk to them, you need a different approach. You can't be as loud or direct. You need to be more patient and subtle. It's the exact same situation on the water. You've caught the extroverted fish. The remaining introverts saw what happened, and they are not impressed with your loud, flashy approach. They are still there and they are still catchable, but you can no longer treat the spot as if it were a fresh, unpressured area. You have to change your social strategy, so to speak. So, what is the practical solution? If waiting for oxygen to return is pointless, what should you do when a spot goes cold? The best strategy is often to rest and return. But now you know you're not waiting for oxygen levels to rebound. You're waiting for the fish's sense of security to return. You're waiting for them to forget the danger and for their natural feeding instincts to take over again. How long does this take? It varies, but a good rule of thumb is at least 30 minutes to an hour. Move to another spot, fish it thoroughly, and then come back to your original honey hole later. When you return, the fish that was spooked will have had time to calm down and reset. They may have forgotten the specific lure or the disturbance and will be more likely to bite again. This simple act of leaving and coming back is far more effective than stubbornly casting at wary, educated fish for another hour straight. Another powerful solution, especially if you don't want to leave the spot, is to completely change your presentation. If you've been burning a white spinnerbait and catching the aggressive fish, the shy ones have seen that lure a dozen times. They are conditioned against it. Sticking with it is pointless. So what do? You show them something completely different. Switch to a finesse approach, put down the casting rod and pick up a spinning rod with light line. Tie on a small natural-coloured Ned rig or a wacky-rigged Senko. Cast it out, let it sink to the bottom and just let it sit. This subtle, non-threatening presentation is a world away from the aggressive lure you were using before. It might be just the thing to convince one of those cautious, observant fish that this is a real, easy meal and not another dangerous trick. You're changing the question you're asking the fish. Finally, if you need one last piece of evidence to completely debunk the oxygen myth, just think about ice fishing. Anglers will sit over the same 8-inch hole in the ice for hours on end, in an environment where the lake is literally sealed off from the atmosphere by a thick layer of ice. There is zero oxygen replenishment from wind and waves, yet they consistently catch fish from the same spot all day long. If the dead zone theory were true, ice fishing would be impossible. The first fish you pulled through the hole would use up the available oxygen, and the spot would be finished for the day. But we know that's not what happens. Ice anglers catch fish because they are patient. They often use very subtle presentations, and they understand that the fish are still down there. This is perhaps the ultimate proof that the fish stop biting due to pressure and conditioning, not because they are running out of air. The problem isn't in the water, it's in their heads. So let's wrap this all up. Is fishing the same hole for 20 minutes creating an oxygen dead zone that fish avoid? The answer is a definitive no. That old piece of advice is a myth, a fairy tale we tell ourselves to explain a frustrating situation. The real reason the bite dies isn't chemical, it's psychological. The culprits are fishing pressure, sensory overload from seeing your lure too many times, and the simple fact that you've already caught all the easy, aggressive fish. The most important thing to take away from this is the why. You're not waiting for the spot to recharge its oxygen. You're waiting for the fish to calm down, to forget the danger, and to feel secure again. This insight is a game changer. It means you can be strategic. Instead of just blindly moving on, you now know you have two powerful options: rest the spot and return later, or switch to a completely different, more subtle presentation to tempt those remaining smarter fish. You've just replaced a useless myth with a powerful strategy. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you look at fishing in a new way, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more content that cuts through the noise. Now for the final question: what's the longest you've ever waited on a spot before the bite turned back on? And did you have to change your lure to make it happen? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's all learn from each other.